So hey everyone, we've all done a lot of listening today, so I appreciate you listening to one more. My name is Fletcher Wilkinson. Do I get slides on here as well?
Yes. Oh, you can see it there.
Okay. So my name is Fletcher Wilkinson. I'm the Climate Change Program Coordinator at the Institute for Tribal Environmental Professionals, and we're located at Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff, Arizona. And before I get going, I just want to sort of first say that tribal climate change issues are super diverse, just as diverse as the tribe's locations and the tribal cultures around the United States. And so I'm going to try to give you all the tribal perspective on climate change, but by no means do I speak to each tribe's problems, because there's a ton of them. So ITEP, ITEP, or the Institute for Tribal Environmental Professionals, we're an organization that's been around for 25 years. This was our anniversary this year. And we work with tribes on all sorts of environmental issues, from air quality to solid waste. And we do training and technical assistance, and we even provide air monitoring equipment. So we do a lot of different things, even lobbying Congress. A few of our program managers spend a lot of time here in DC. And another thing we do is work with a lot of partner organizations on projects, and that's sort of a big part of accomplishing our goals and helping tribes. The climate change program, we started in 2009. We're a little bit newer than ITEP. We started with an EPA grant, and we're 100% grant funded. And our main goal, well, we want to be a one-stop shop for tribes. So anything that they need to address climate change, we want to be able to give that to them and help them out. And our overarching goal is to build capacity of tribes to deal with climate change on their own. Part of tribal sovereignty is not having to rely on the federal government, so they want to be able to address these issues by themselves, which can be difficult in small communities. And so part of that building capacity is holding training workshops. And so what we do is go out and partner with either a host tribe or an organization in a region, and invite either 25 or 35 tribal participants to come, and for a few days we talk about the issues that they're facing and how they can address it. So we work through all the way from building buy-in and trust from their tribe to work on these issues, and then developing a vulnerability assessment, and eventually writing their own adaptation plan. So we did one, we've held 30 of them total in the last few years, and we just completed one in Anchorage, Alaska a couple weeks ago, and right after this I'll be flying out to one in Spokane this week. And then we've got about 4 or 5 more planned this year. So then another tool that we provide them is we have a website with a whole host of information that tribes can use, from profiles of other tribes that are working with climate change to tribal adaptation plans that have already been implemented. And then we also provide a toolkit. I know we've been talking about those today, but we have a toolkit that's specific to tribes. And this toolkit is essentially a set of documents that tribes can use to walk through the planning process. So they can identify the risks and use worksheets to list those out. And we also even have a template that they can use to start their adaptation plan, the actual document itself, which is really helpful, especially for smaller tribes that have low capacity just due to the fact that maybe it's a village of a few hundred people. And then another thing is direct technical assistance. A few of my colleagues actually work with tribes directly to help them write their plans. So there on the right is the picture of our template. But tribal planning is definitely a little bit different than maybe a city or a state's planning efforts. And I guess I want to set the context for this for you all. Many tribal communities have been located in one area or even one village for not hundreds but thousands of years. And so people that live there now, they grew up there, and their grandparents grew up there, and their grandparents' grandparents, and so on through many generations. And so their entire identity, from their culture to their history, their spirituality, and their food pathways it's all connected to that place where they live. And so this sense of place is really, really strong and needs to be integrated throughout the entire planning process. So when tribes are working on a vulnerability assessment, one of the big things that they need to be focusing on, and that comes up often when they're talking about it, is their traditional foods. A lot of tribes, especially in the West and especially in Alaska, they don't go to supermarkets for their foods, and a lot of people are engaging in subsistence, hunting, gathering, and agriculture. So traditional foods are really important to them. And then there's also culturally important resources which need to be considered. Things like sagebrush to the Navajo are really important, and they're used for a whole host of different things, including ceremonies. And the potential loss of that resource could be devastating to the culture. Adaptation plans, once you get to the adaptation plan stage, there's also some differences. The main one being traditional ecological knowledge, or TEK, or traditional knowledge. It's known by a few different terms. And this is a really powerful tool that should be integrated into their adaptation plans. And traditional knowledge comes from living in an area for thousands of years. And it's this really unique knowledge or understanding of place that tribes have, just from seeing the changes in sea ice or wildlife in their area over many, many generations. And so this can be integrated into adaptation planning and help with looking at, well, this is how things were 100 years ago, and here we are now. Sea ice is getting thinner and disappearing sooner. Where are we going to be in 50 or 100 years? And then relocation is something that's also very different for tribes. Excuse me. It's something that cities don't often deal with, but tribes are already starting to have to deal with. A tribe in Louisiana, for example, has a grant to move, and some tribes in Alaska and Washington are also considering moving. And so for Native peoples who have lived in an area for so long, and like I said, all of their culture is based on that location, relocation is a really emotional thing to deal with. Okay, so now looking at health, when you think about climate change and health, we've talked about all day how everything is so interconnected, and the same goes for tribes. And I think a good example of this is the food calendar that many tribes live by, collecting, harvesting, or hunting different types of foods at different times of the year, including cultural resources that have to be collected at very specific times. With climate change, plant species are sometimes moving higher in elevation or disappearing altogether. Different animal species are moving to different ranges. I was in Alaska a few weeks ago and speaking to a man who told me that when he was a kid, they would go hunt for caribou all the time, and that was a really important food to them. But caribou don't come near their village anymore. And a few years ago, the last time he went on a caribou hunt, he actually had to travel 160 miles one way by snowmobile to go hunt caribou. And so these are some really massive changes that are impacting tribal peoples. And it's not just impacting their food. You know, having to travel 160 miles is certainly stressful. It's taxing on the physical, you know, your body. And not being able to collect this food for your family and also for your community, because food sharing is so important, that impacts your spiritual and cultural connections within the community. And there have even been cases of suicides linked to not being able to provide. So it's a very serious problem. And some of these pictures down here, like this is up in Alaska. Coastal erosion is obviously a big problem. And just one of the very, very many problems that tribes are dealing with. So I'm going to wrap up on a positive note, and that is tribes are resilient. It's not all doom and gloom. There are solutions out there just like everywhere else. You know, we just have to find them and work for them. And tribes, because of their culture and their long history here, their long history of adaptation, have some strengths that are going for them. Traditional knowledge is definitely one of those strengths. They have a long history of working with the environment and understanding the environment, and through knowledge sharing with other tribes nearby, they can learn new practices that can help them work through climate change. And there's a really good example of that on the Hopi Nation. There's a program to teach Hopi farmers new ways to farm their corn, which is starting to become a serious issue on the reservation just because of drought. But I think programs like that, or programs like in Alaska, where some communities are holding culture camps in the summer for a few weeks to bring their elders and bring their youth together to teach their language and their history and their traditional methods of collecting food, you know, things like that, to strengthen your culture and strengthen community bonds that small villages can rely on for resilience, are really important and a big strength. So thanks, and happy to take questions.
Wonderful.